Okay, picking up where I left off. Now, in this video, I want to address the question, what would strongly suggest that the punishment on the Amorites, Canaanites, is not an extermination, but rather an expulsion from the land? And that's exactly what we've detailed in the last couple of videos. This is an altogether different issue now from genocide to expulsion from the land, and this understanding makes perfect sense of a couple of other verses now. Leviticus 18 verses 24 through 29 says, and also I'd encourage you to look at Leviticus 20 verse 22, do not defile yourselves in these ways, because this is how the nations that I'm going to drive out before you have become defiled. Even the land was defiled, so I punished it for its sin, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you must keep my decrees and my laws, and the native born and the aliens living among you must not do any of these detestable things. Again, what were the detestable things? I discussed in a few videos back: child sacrifice, incest, bestiality, and so on. Look at the video on their worship practices. For all these things were done by the people who lived in the land before you, and the land became defiled. And if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. Everyone who does these detestable things, such as persons, must be cut off from their people. Notice in verses 28 to 29, God holds Israel to the same standard both as a nation, verse 28, and as individuals, verse 29. He didn't intend to annihilate them when they later went pagan, but he warned them of expulsion from the land in the same way he did the Canaanites. For this comparison to work in the verse, the punishment vomit must mean expulsion. But was it the same way? Absolutely. Read about Israel's and Judah's expulsion in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verses 30 through 33, Isaiah 57:5, 2 Kings 17:17, Jeremiah 13:27, 1 Kings 15:22, chapter 22 verse 46, 2 Kings 23:7. And Ezekiel 45:9, as well as Isaiah 59:6 through 10. God judged them to be expelled from the land. He sent the Babylonians to drive them out. They were supposed to obey God and go into exile, and the prophets told the people to surrender to disposition to avoid being killed. If the residents of Judah had surrendered to the Babylonians, they would have simply been deported or expelled from the land to Babylon, just as the northern kingdom had been migrated forcibly to other lands. This is basically the same motive: migrate or be executed. The number of people actually killed in the attacks of Babylonia would have been small, but the number transplanted out of the land would have been considerable. It is interesting to note that the Assyrians drove out Israel and used the deportation and transplantation strategy to basically annihilate the culture without killing a mass group of people. They knew that had dispossessed people would be assimilated into larger social groups, as basically happened with some of the northern 10 tribes. The Assyrians did this routinely, by the way. Take a look at the history of ancient Palestine by Alstrom, 1993. Basically, the summary is this: the Israelites have been promised a specific area of the land since the time of Abraham. Most of the local indigenous peoples were either descendants of Abraham or were familiar with the traditions of these people. When the time had come, God judged the Canaanites and decreed for them to be expelled from the land. Their tenure was up and they were evicted. New tenants were moving in. The Canaanites were given decades and decades of notice in many ways and in different times. And they understood clearly all the records we have of their understanding of their plight is totally in line with the land grant of Yahweh. With the eviction notice published, the Canaanites could decide either to evacuate the premises peacefully or deal with military force. If they vacated peacefully, they could choose their locations, mode of travel, and not have to deal with the unpleasant military overseers. If they chose to challenge Israel's God and his expressed intentions, then they did so with complete knowledge of his power, as displayed in Egypt. Even though they were the scourge of the earth at the time by international consensus, God did not desire to annihilate the people. His express intentions were to move them away from his people. He gave them ample opportunity to leave peacefully before Israel arrived, and even allowed the bulk of less institutionalization to have a little longer life. His people were not instructed to hunt them down in neighboring nations at all. Israel was severely restricted in the conquest. They were not allowed to be simple land grabbers or wealth seekers or self-righteous or land scourgers or international empire builders or captive abusive. At the same time, they were to eliminate the threat of the Canaanite destructive influence, both spiritual and physical, if called upon. And God allowed no double standards. When Israel began to look like the Canaanites, God judged them in the same way and vomited them from the land as well. This expulsion was accomplished by the harsh measures of warfare faced by the Canaanites. The punishment of the Amorites, Canaanites was thus one of deportation, not one of genocide. I'll answer now in the next video. I'm going to answer this question: what other general principles of God's governance might shed some light on this situation? Thanks.